whenever you're ready.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Lead Stories podcast, where we believe that everyone has influence.
And if you're intentional with your influence, then we think that you are leaders, and that's why we're doing what we are doing.
Yay!
Here, I'm
Hey.
Pastor Steph.
And I'm Jo Saxton.
We are so glad to be here with you.
Yes, we are.
I mean, you're not in this room right now, but you could be watching us on YouTube right now. If you want to feel like you can see the blue wall behind us. Welcome.
Welcome, YouTube and friends.
I've really enjoyed this series so far. It's been a great kickoff to season 7, which is still mind-boggling.
Yes.
And it's called Level Up Your Leadership.
Yeah. Yes, it is.
Do you want to give a little overview just in case this is the first episode someone's dropped into?
If it's the first time you've joined us, well, welcome. It's good to have you with us.
Yeah.
And when we're talking about leveling up our leadership, we're recognizing basically the key areas of our life that we need to become, to realize our potential as leaders. And actually, some of that is circumstantial and environmental, but some of it is actually to do with us.
Yeah.
And there are things that we can do in often overlooked parts of our life.
Yes.
That can make all the difference in our leadership.
Yes, and it's interesting how we often overlook these because I would say they once you say them, they kind of seem obvious.
Yeah.
But fundamental. But our experience has been in our own lives and in the lives of other leaders that we've coached that sometimes it actually is what gets left behind and not focused on. And we're, for instance, we focus a ton on exactly how we're going to make a presentation and what we're going to say and the way that comes across, and have not dealt with how we're going to walk into the room and feel okay about ourselves.
Yes.
And so then you can have a great presentation, but you really can't cover up the sense of insecurity you're stepping into in that space, something like that.
No, it's good. It got me thinking. I think we've spent a lot of time talking about and investing in what we believe makes us successful as leaders in terms of the external stuff. And we've not paid anywhere near as much time and attention to the things that actually cause us to fail.
Yeah. Right.
Because not being as good at those things doesn't actually necessarily lead us to failure. It means that we've got areas to grow and train and get qualifications in. This stuff, nothing entirely.
It's the thing that leads to people having to say, I didn't see that coming.
Yeah. Which is a very vulnerable place to be. And it's a very vulnerable place to be when you're leading others.
So we'd like no one to get there.
Yeah. So preemptive strike it is.
And some people listening to this have been there. You've been to that spot where you thought, I don't know how it got to this point where
but here I am.
I lost trust with my team. I had a moral failure. I burned out. I don't know. I don't know what it takes to get from where you are now to there, but let's not find out. Let's deal with these things. So we already talked about identity, which I think you and I both agree is a never-ending process of continually looking at who are you. Who does God say you are? What narratives are telling you who you are? And it's almost like the rest of it needs to come from that foundation.
Yes.
And so that's really important.
We looked at the body and energy.
Yeah.
Again, one of those areas we too easily take for granted. But our leadership lives in it, so we do need to pay attention. Turns out that that's quite a relevant one.
Yeah, it really is. And then today we're going to talk about a topic that I think you and I are both pretty passionate about.
Yeah.
You don't have to look at too much of either of our writing or speaking or preaching to hear us talk about this topic and how important it is, which I think what we're talking about today would be the integration and intersection of our psychological health and spiritual health.
Yeah.
The way that those two things go hand in hand, the fact that we don't believe you can separate them, that our emotional and psychological health is paramount when it comes to being a healthy leader.
Because it comes out, it flows through our relationships, our emotions, how we handle them. And I think it's one of those areas that we haven't always paid attention to. Yeah. And I think now I know not everybody who's listening to this podcast is coming from a faith-based perspective, but for those of us who are, I think it would be fair to say in church contexts, we have paid a lot of attention to a leader's devotional life and may not have paid as much attention to their psychological imprint and life and emotions. Yeah. And we've seen a sign of maturity being those spiritual devotions. Do they pray? Do they fast? Do they read the Bible? We haven't thought about whether they're a nice person.
Yeah, and I think you could expand that out into spirituality in general. Like, are people who are meditating or doing yoga or doing great stuff, great. Who's asking you what's going on in your thought life?
Yeah.
Who's helping you process some of these things that are potentially negating any space of mindfulness that you're trying to create, because when you go to a space of mindfulness, what fills your mind is untrue things about you or high levels of anxiety, unhealthy and toxic stress. I mean, the list could go on.
Yeah, and we as leaders, we don't want to walk through life and leadership lacking self-awareness.
Right.
Lacking awareness of if we have a spiritual life that is meaningful, it should show.
Yeah.
And it should not just show in the fact that we can log the amount of the Bible we've read. It should show in the way that we treat people.
Absolutely.
Treat each other, deal with our pasts, deal with our present, handle pressure, handle tragedy, all of these things. I'm not saying that we've got to achieve those things, but that when life is spiritual, so our devotional life somehow should overflow into those things. And if we're not aware of where we're at psychologically, then well, that's indicating something.
Exactly. Yeah, and if we're not willing to be honest about where we are. So there's the inability to know where we're at. Then there's the inability to be honest with ourselves and other people about where we're at. There's a lot of shame with this.
I was going to say, I think stigma plays a big role.
There's a lot of stigma. A couple of years ago, we did a series called Stigmas.
Yeah, we lost a lot of listeners, actually.
We did lose some people. But we focused for a little while on the topic of emotional health because of the stigma. And I think for leaders, there is this, I think, a deep fear and anxiety about having to acknowledge that you struggle with depression, that you struggle with anxiety, that you're feeling overwhelmed, that you're dealing with overwhelm or whatever those things are. There's this like, I can't appear as though I have any weaknesses psychologically.
And it's sad what we've defined as weakness. It's sad that we have so stigmatized certain aspects of the human condition that we have to perform leadership.
Right.
We have to perform a presentational mode.
Right.
Because it's hollow.
Yeah.
It's hollow and eventually it cracks.
If you're making a presentation, then make a presentation. That's what presenting is. Your life can't be a presentation.
Yeah. Your life's got to be a little bit more authentic than that.
It's got to be. It's not sustainable. Like, it will cause you to psychologically crack. Like, you will crack.
Well, it's like you can't live these, you can't live a siloed life.
No.
We're designed for an integration.
Yeah.
So
whenever I've had the opportunity to talk to somebody about previous experiences that they've had with self-deception, so where they were not aware of what was going on.
Yeah.
When we talk about how they feel, when they're looking back, hindsight bias, how did I get to a spot where what was going on, I could log this many hours in reading the Bible, but over here I was having this significant breakdown. It's the siloed thing. It's like I bought the lie. The self-deception was buying the lie that I could separate these things. That these behaviors over here weren't affecting this. That this way of thinking over here wasn't going to come out in this spot. And that's just not real. Yeah. But you can live in the silo myth for a long time.
Yeah, and I think it's reinforced when we don't speak to normalizing it.
Yeah.
I think it's reinforced because, well, no conversation offers no guidance.
Yeah. So, would you be willing to share a little bit of your own journey with just wrestling through this? I mean, maybe just at either a specific instance or maybe just at a high level, like what it's looked like for you to attend to this part of your life.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing that comes to mind is I'm very grateful that we did the body the week before, because I think for me, it's often been in the slowing down that I've seen areas of disintegration.
Yeah.
I think it's in the slowing down where I get a chance, otherwise I'm too busy just doing this, that, and the other. I think things like this are shown for me on a couple of areas. When I think of my 20s, I think of a distinct lack of self-awareness. I was very spiritual in many ways. I was committed to prayer, particularly as committed to reading the Bible, but I hadn't quite worked out where to place the hurt.
Yeah.
And to place the wounding. I didn't quite have a framework for that. But I think I've noticed, for me, a kind of invitation to draw nearer in leveling up in these areas when I'm dealing with things like forgiveness. And unforgiveness.
Because that's the kind of pain that can get misplaced.
Yeah, can get misplaced. Yeah. And when I'm attending to anger, and how I feel as a woman about anger, how I feel culturally as a Black woman about anger and the perceptions, but all of that is one thing. But also, what am I doing with this anger? And I've had to pay attention to where my emotions go.
Yeah.
I think that's the thing, because I can say they go to prayer, but they actually sometimes go to food.
Yep.
They go to a conversation, which is an argument, and that argument is actually not about that conversation at the moment. It's about something.
Right. It's not about how we load the dishwasher wrong. It's actually not about that.
It's not about the dishwasher.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it can go to shopping. It can come shopping with me.
Yep. It can go to physical pain in parts of your body.
Yep, into parts of your body. It can definitely, in my case, it will often go to sleeplessness.
Yep. So you just struggle with sleeping regularly.
And because my mind is playing and having the conversations that I was refusing to have during the day.
I'm just going to let that sit there for a second. When you're having the conversations that you refuse to have during the day.
I mean,
I know exactly
other
what you're
places,
talking
the
about.
car, the fantasy arguments where you have the last word.
Right.
And you said that thing that came to mind.
The thing that came to mind later.
And sometimes for comedy value, it's just a silly thing. But sometimes...
Right. Or just coming out of that meeting with the team and that one person, they're just so frustrating. And it's like, you got to deal with that stuff because the bitterness, the root of bitterness, that's a thing.
Yeah.
And it will
grow up and define.
It will.
It will.
And I don't mean to say that you can change that person or say it's your supervisor or something, but you've got to figure out how to put that stuff in a spot that's actually constructive and not destructive.
And I think I've learned to take some of those things as indicators. When I see a particular emotion or even see my defense mechanisms coming up, I think they highlight something of where I need to engage and mature. And I think I wonder whether for us as leaders we don't automatically level up on these things because they're not seen. They're not always seen.
Right.
And so we can silo it and put it away for another day until it defines how we relate to people.
Yeah.
Until it makes us judgmental people or whatever. I think the other thing that has helped me process some of this stuff is the rise and ever-knowing rise of whatever the personality tool du jour. Do you know what I mean? Whether it was Myers-Briggs or whether it was StrengthsFinders or whether it was Enneagram or whatever, and whichever one of those things has the best Instagram feed. Do you know what I mean? I think what's been helpful about that is that it's helped me recognize personality.
Yeah.
Just recognize it. People are different. People function in different ways. And then the assumptions therefore I have about myself or others may need some filters.
That's really good. Yeah, that's really good. As I was thinking about this for myself, I can look back over my life and see the times where I was disintegrated and where I was like almost just wanted to avoid that part of life because it felt like you said the things that were more on the surface and more visible were easier to deal with and had more of a reaction or response, like so if the thing that's external is done well, like giving a presentation, then you're going to get feedback for that, where if it's going well inside or outside, inside internally and psychologically, it may or may not get any feedback. It might, the most miserable person might be me, and then let's be honest, it will make other people miserable as well who are around you. And I think about a time where I was living with a lot of different people and didn't realize that I was going through some like low level depression, which is called dysthymia, and didn't have that diagnosis and thought I was dealing with an unusual fatigue. It felt like being tired and frustrated. Sadness is actually not a word that I would use. And so for that time, and I think that that's what threw me off with there's something going on psychologically, because in my mind, the word depression meant sad, but it didn't manifest that way. It was coming across as being frustrated, easily irritated with myself, other people. So when you're living in small spaces with many other women doing community together, that's not going to go super well. Yeah. And really tired, just really, really fatigued, never could get enough sleep. So I wasn't actually having trouble sleeping. I was sleeping too long. But it wasn't like I couldn't get out of bed. It hadn't. And I mean, if as a pastor and as a leader, one of the things people say to me the most when I talk about this topic is the phrase, do you think it's that bad that I should go to my doctor, that I should see a therapist? And I'm going, well, why would we wait until something like a phrase that bad? Yeah. Because that was the example for me, right? So I didn't notice that it was at a level that needed to be attended to, because in my preconceived notion about this is like someone who just can't get out of bed. They're so sad. Yeah. But that I absolutely was having depression symptoms. I just didn't know that I had boxed in what that looked like, and I waited longer than I think I needed to get some support for that. And and medication and my experience with my therapist was so helpful, and was helped me to access some of the emotions and the healing and the wounds that I needed to access so that I could pursue healing, so that I was able to move through. So it was like those actions of the therapist and the medication were actually just the launching pad into the healing that was way deeper than that needed to happen. I don't think I could have done that work, and I think the word work is helpful.
Yeah.
If I didn't do that, I just don't think I could have done it. So I think that is to me why this is such an important conversation, because I didn't get to a place of burnout or whatever, but I definitely could have been an easier person to live with, and and it just felt, I was miserable. Like I was feeling miserable. I was frustrated, and I felt like this can't be the case. I'm sleeping way more than people who I know, because I knew a lot of people at the time who had newborns. And I'm like, so I should not be so tired. What's going on?
You know, I'm struck by a number of things that you're saying there. One about, is it bad enough? Do you know what I mean? Is it when people ask me, has it hard enough? Is it really that bad? And I can't remember who did it, but there's a TED talk called Emotional First Aid. And he makes the point of, you know, we get a cut or a graze, and we bleed and we give ourselves a band-aid, and yet in our internal lives we wait until things are all the way in another place. And he goes, what is it, how about a few things in the early stage,
right,
that I think are really important, that are just important for us to consider as we're looking at what it means to grow and to self-lead and to mature in this area, so that we are more robust,
right,
because this directly relates to our capacity as leaders. It just does,
right.
But I'm also, oh gosh, there are just so many things about this I'm struck by. I'm struck by what we lose when we, like, not doing anything isn't a neutral point.
Yes.
You don't get it. It has
indecision,
diminishing
still
returns.
A decision.
Yeah, there are diminishing returns with this, and it made me wonder how many people are living and leading at a level of mild depression, thinking, well, it's not terrible.
Right.
Or I'm just tired.
I guess this is just what this is.
And if we don't have a pattern of checking in with ourselves emotionally, if our only pattern is, am I reading the Bible enough? Or if our only pattern is, am I meditating or am I praying? If that's our pattern, what are we going to miss?
Right.
Because it manifests itself in a way that we don't, isn't a checklist for our definitions of well-being.
Yeah.
The other thing I was struck by is, who was it now? There's I think it was a Gallup poll, a 2018 Gallup survey, which noted that about 63% of people would say that in the workplace, full-time employees, they surveyed 7,500 full-time employees. 63%, no, it wasn't that. It was 23% who said that they were burnt out, like always and often. 44% said sometimes.
So
2/3 of the workplace.
Yeah, sometimes or often.
Yeah, and then of those, of the people surveyed, 63% said they were more likely to take a sick day. 23% in the emergency room.
In the emergency room?
End up in the emergency room because of the levels of burnout and stuff. And and all of this was related to not just the demands physically, but recognizing, and I think there are studies that show that burnout isn't always just about your busyness,
right,
but about the disconnect internally with what's going on. And so these things, these low-level kind of mild versions of this kind of emotional draining, this psychological draining, whether it's relational or whatever, isn't going away, and it isn't without impact, and therefore is automatically having an impact on our relationships, our families, our leadership, the whole thing.
Yep. I think what's coming to mind for me is just some warnings that I noticed, like maybe that would help people think about like what are the warnings. One of them that I think of is when you're assuming that if you have space in your calendar, then your emotional capacity can handle it.
Oh, golly.
And
unpack that a little bit more.
So you'll look at your calendar and you'll say, oh, well, so-and-so wants me to do this, or I'm taking on that extra side hustle. I've got time because look at my calendar. I have time. The kids are being watched here, or, I have this margin here because I'm going to be done with this class in grad school or whatever. And so then we take on things thinking that we have the resources to handle said things, even just social things, even just time to spend with people, even friends, but certainly people you might be coaching or leading, or people who are friends that you pour into a lot, or a mentor. There's this ability, this tendency to say yes to that because you look at your calendar on your phone and say, oh, I have space in the calendar. But that's not the same question as, do I have emotional space? Do I have emotional capacity for this new venture, for this time, for this space? It comes back to this knowing yourself and knowing who you are, and being introverted or extroverted, like you said about the Myers-Briggs. And when you know about who you are and where you're at, if you can answer how are you doing psychologically, if you can answer how is your soul, these are the questions that how am I really doing? If you can answer those things, then those should impact the answer to that should impact whether or not you have time to invest, more than is my calendar free.
Yeah, that's really good, because if you ask yourself questions like how is your soul, or what are the primary negative emotions I'm feeling right now,
right,
and why?
Yep.
What would that show us?
Yeah.
But the dilemma is we're not always asking. Well, no, more often than not, we're not asking those questions, because it has to be intentional.
Right.
We have to check in. We have to have checkups. Like my kids have an annual health check.
Right.
And as leaders, we need to work out our way of having our annual, not even just annual, our seasonal, our weekly, monthly, quarterly check-in. But that check-in not just about our productivity, not just about our passion, but every aspect of our well-being.
Yep.
And to pay some attention, to observe, just to watch who we are, just to watch what is going on, would indicate some things about how we can strengthen our capacity. Because you only really realize that your capacity is low when something's wrong.
But you don't have to wait till then.
No,
but that is what we see happen.
That's what we end up. We're like, okay, I hit a wall, so now it's like, how about hitting a wall isn't the automatic?
Yeah, the only way to get to that. Yeah, so that's a good point too. So I think when you notice that kind of thing, when you notice that you are starting to approach things as though you'll never have another chance if you don't say yes to this, or
this topic is so big.
Yeah, or this is when you notice in yourself this, it's because what I want to name is that's anxiety. So I have to take this opportunity. I have to say yes to this person, even though I don't think this meeting is in the top of my priority list right now about my work or my life. I'm going to say yes, because what if it leads to this opportunity? Like these kinds of ways of thinking, these patterns of thinking, we see that as almost like strategic. It's like, are you sure it's not anxiety?
That's so good.
Because strategic, I'm fine. No one's saying don't have strategy. But when you're naming consistently anxious vocational stress as like strategy, maybe you're cloaking it in strategy.
Yeah, maybe your strategy is rooted in anxiety.
I think so. Or
she went there.
Or I must do this grad program while I'm also doing this new, opportunity, and I'm also starting a hobby, and it's like this.
I've also got 3 children. And and
it's this like, I have to do all these things at the same time. I'm not even saying that you're not supposed to. I'm saying that the warning sign is that you're feeling like I have to. Or another thing would be, if I don't deal with this, whatever this is right now, something will fall apart. Gosh, the amount of times we think that to where that's actually real is usually a pretty big disconnect.
Yeah, the way we've created a crazy crisis.
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah, crazy crisis. Now, I think that it would be a good practice to think through. I love, remember we interviewed all the Jessicas? Jessica Turner. She used the example of the glass balls and the rubber balls. Yeah. And that we're all juggling a lot of balls, which ones are glass and which ones are rubber. Yeah. When you just assume all of them are glass, that's a sign. That's a sign. They're not all glass. They're not all glass. I mean, if you think they're all rubber, that might be a problem too. But it's the ability to know the difference and to talk about it with other people. Any other kind of warning signs that you think of when you've seen in yourself or other people that the psychological health is not going great?
I mean, I think I'm mindful of the extremes of emotion. like anger. I think anger is a secondary emotion, isn't it? It's because fear and pain. So when
and we're okay with anger as a thing.
Absolutely.
But when you're like, where did that come from?
But it's an indicator. It's when, I think for me, the alarm is when we don't allow the indicators to be indicators. When we repress them and say, oh my gosh, I'm angry. The answer is I must never be angry again.
Right.
Or I'm anxious. I'm going to quote scripture all over this and not going to actually bring it to the Lord by engaging with it.
Yep.
I think that for me is the avoidance and the repression of genuine God-shaped, God-designed indicators for our holistic well-being.
Yeah.
And when we cover them with a verse, instead of acknowledge them and weigh them and process them, that's when I think, capacity is going to be an interesting one. Yeah. And I think sometimes, I mean, we're intense personalities. And
I've never heard that.
That's because you surround yourself with similarly intense personalities.
I hear it.
I think when we aren't, I think that I come back again to the personality stuff. And I think we can have certain ways of being that we lean on too heavily. And I think when we become a little one-dimensional in that, whether it's your intensity or whether it's your cynicism or whether it's your performance or whatever.
And then say, it's fine that I'm like this. This is who I am.
This is who I am. I'm a
take an introvert, for instance.
Yeah.
That means people need time alone to recharge.
Yeah.
But when you're withdrawing from other people and hiding who you truly are, that is
the timing of the light going out was perfect.
Our lights went out.
I'm going to move.
This is our new theme, the lights going out in the room that we're recording in. It's almost like you haven't heard a podcast if the lights don't go out.
You haven't.
So, I think it's an interesting, you're going to have to run over there. Yeah. We have to move around and do some gymnastics to get the lights to go back on. I mean, I respect the energy conservation situation. I appreciate the energy conservation. She did it. Joe, congrats. Way to go.
Thank you very much.
We do need like a camera for the YouTube folks to see us running around, because you can't actually see it in this shot, but
I'm just pretty fun. Ready to share that part of me. Just yet.
Anyway, okay, so just the signs that someone might be not doing well. So for instance, that sense of withdrawing. Regardless of your personality, if you find yourself telling people in your life who are the people who have the right to ask you, how are you really? And then you say fine to those people. I don't care if you say fine to the people who are just saying it as like a,
as a pleasantry.
I'm saying when someone says to you, how are you really? And you don't tell them. Yeah. I'm saying the people, when you find yourself holding back certain things from the people that you know have earned the trust to know where you're at and how you're feeling, that's a sign. That's something to pay attention to.
When you don't have people, that's a sign.
When you don't even have the people, that's a sign for sure. Those kinds of things, I think.
I think behavior on a loop.
Talk about that.
I think, so you have an angry day.
Yeah, right.
Everybody has a bad day.
Right.
Angry month. Or a certain set of circumstances that always produce a particular kind of reaction from you.
Right.
Particular personality type that brings out a particular reaction because they remind you of somebody else.
Right.
I think those ones, I think they're worth observing. I think they're indicators worth paying attention to. I think repeated behavior. Repeated vices. Yeah. If there are particular go-tos, shopping, food, whatever, at the end of the day, or at the start of the day, or in the middle of the day, I think they're indicators of. I think it's for me. It's I keep on coming back to what's happening in your mind and emotions. What are they saying? What are they actually? What
are they telling you?
Rather than, and I think when I've seen kind of lack of integration on the spiritual and the emotional, it's like we've seen those things and we've said those shouldn't be there. Those shouldn't be there. Let's pray them out. Let's push them away. Let's walk away from those things. Those shouldn't be there. And when I hear that, that makes me nervous.
Yeah, definitely.
It makes me nervous.
Actually, as you're talking about that, a tool that my current therapist, thank you, love you, shared with me is really helpful in this. So, because even if you could see, you were using this like image of pushing something down. Yeah. So she said a helpful way to think about this, paying attention to what your mind and body and heart is saying, is the difference between a compartmentalizing something and then putting it in a container. So she said, imagine a container is like a clear plastic Tupperware. Yeah. And when you're a leader, you'll experience things in your day where you actually can't sit down and process that. That would be irresponsible. But what you kind of want to do is compartmentalize it and say, this is not a part of my life. Put it away in a compartment that I'm going to lock away, like dig, throw away the key, bury it.
Yeah.
That's what the word compartmentalization usually means in psychological sense. Container is, okay, I need to continue to lead this meeting, but I'm going to put that into a container and that has a clear, it's clear. I'm going to put the top on and I'm going to take that with me. And later on, when I have a chance, I'm going to sit down, open it up and say, what was going on there? Yeah. And there's so many times that I have to do something like that. The example I'm thinking of right now is that I officiated my first funeral for a child last week.
Gosh.
And although by the time someone's listening to this, it's probably been about a month. And 4-year-old died of cancer, very tragic, horrible. There is no celebrating in this funeral because that's not how anyone felt. It was a time of mourning. Wow. And I had to stand in front of 300 and something people and help them create this space for this. And there was so much anxiety and things that I was feeling. And so I was trying to attend to that. But when I had to actually get up there and look at all these sobbing faces and speak to these people, I was presenting. It was a presentation, and I really talked through that with myself of like putting my own grief and feelings of anxiety into the container and putting it down and asking and asking for God's peace in that moment.
Yeah.
Stepping into that, doing that.
Yeah.
And then I came home that evening, and on the way home, I opened the container, metaphorically speaking. My husband asked me some good questions. We processed it. And then I canceled the meeting I had the next morning.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't a crazy meeting. I just said, you know what? I need some space.
Yeah, you need some time.
And then I slept a little bit longer and I got up and I thought through some of that stuff. And this is just the way that I process that. Everyone's lifestyle wouldn't have the same opportunity, but that's what I had to do.
Yeah, but there was a process.
Because that is not something I do every week.
No.
And I know enough from other pastors I've talked to and leaders like me that if you were to just say, okay, well, that was hard. Hello Monday, like that's just not going to work. It's not going to work long term. And my father-in-law said like that'll mess you up for a while. That's the way he puts it. If you don't deal with that, that'll mess you up for a while. And it's just a fact. It's just a reality. Right. It is not strong to compartmentalize and move on. That is not strength.
That is not strength. That's denial.
Yeah.
And that's very vulnerable.
Yeah. I mean, that was very hard. That was one of the hardest things that I've done before. And so to say, look at me, this is what I do. That's not going to work. I had to say like, that was very hard. I felt very anxious. I feel really sad. That was a lot to carry and I need to work through that because this is not business as usual. No. That was really difficult. So
it's a good way of reflecting on it.
So so the container thing, you know, for me has been helpful in the sleeplessness problem too, where it's, you know, these things are going through your head and it's like, I think of it as, okay, this needs to go into a container that I will open up tomorrow because I actually will have more ability to pay attention to that tomorrow if I can do that. Now, this is not easy what I'm saying. It's kind of simple, but it's not easy to do.
Well, and I think that statement would overarch this entire, the series on one level, but particularly this episode, that the engaging with all that's going on internally is a simple theme, idea, but very there's a reason why. The reason why we're doing this topic, is because it's very, very hard.
It's very hard to do,
and to stay in it.
And if you hear me talking about the compartmentalizing versus container, and you think I can't even imagine having that much control over my thoughts, that's when I'm going to say you need to ask somebody to help you.
Yeah,
that's fine.
And that is an integral part of this, is that the more we discuss this area, in the same way with physical needs, you might need a physical therapist, you might need a personal trainer, you might need someone to help you reach your goals, you might need resources that advise you and tell you this is what healthy food is, this is what's unhealthy food. And yet, this often already neglected area is one where we may need to look at resources beyond our own thinking and beyond our own awareness. We may need to talk, whether it's talking to someone, support group, all the way through to therapist, counselor, priest, whatever. Someone beyond our own minds who can help us say, hey, that's a compartment. Hey, that's a container.
And if you have that conversation with someone and it was really brave and it feels really awkward and uncomfortable, then that might mean that was the wrong person.
Yeah.
Please go to the next person.
Yeah. Rather than say, okay, I'm now packing away my bags and going and hiring them.
Every once in a while you do have a weird connection with the therapist. Just, it's their job. Just say, okay, well, and call somebody else.
Yes.
You know, so it's just
that bit's your job.
That important.
Yeah.
And I too want to say, I try to say this as much as I can as a pastor. I'm sorry if people in roles like mine ever said, just pray about it more. And I'm sorry if people in roles like mine said, it's probably because something's wrong about what you're doing and God isn't giving you peace, or I don't know, whatever religious, spiritual rhetoric that is downplaying emotional and health. I just think that is wrong, and there's a need to repent of that for people in roles like mine. And you know, maybe you don't need a pastor to say that, but if you need a pastor to say you can see a therapist, you can have Jesus and medication and a therapist, and actually maybe God is the one who created the human ability to understand our minds. You can't tell me that the fact that we can read people's brain scans is just a happenstance. That to me, that's because God is amazing.
I don't think humanity gets the credit for that.
No, I'm not gonna
I don't think we get the credit for that.
Yeah, like people who chose to pursue it, but like I just think God's going to use all that stuff, and I'm sorry if someone told you that was not right, or made you think that wasn't right, or something.
And let's talk to, because again, our audience are leaders, and our audience are people who are seeking to be intentional with their influence. And we know I met some of you out as I go about my business. Your business leaders, your church leaders, your nonprofit leaders, whatever. We want you to know that as leaders, you have permission to get help you need for you. Yeah. It's absolutely vital.
You could pay for it.
Yeah, there you go.
You can take time off for it.
And it is vital that this, rather than I'm a leader, I should be better than this by now. I should be over this by now. I should have capacity by now.
And it's not doing anyone a favor that you're leading, because then you're setting up a house of cards that looks like, look, this is what life can be like. Yeah, right. Instead, you're saying, hey, this is what it looks like to be someone who thinks about my holistic well-being and isn't perfect at it, but really tries, needs a lot of help.
And it may be that you, by virtue of your roles and your positions and jobs, need to go further afield to find certain things.
Sure.
But you still got to find them.
Yeah.
It's still important to find
them. I'm always telling people, like, I need a lot of help. I seriously won't function. I need a lot of help just so that my dog gets fed and like I actually have clean clothes to wear and be a functional human being. And I mean, for me, so maybe that would just be good to share just a little bit of like practical what that looks like for to maintain it as healthy as possible. For me, it looks like what we talked about last week about your body, and know that if I don't attend to exercise, and not crazy, just regular exercise and what I'm eating and stuff, that's going to mess with my mind. I often have a therapist. I don't always, it's not like every single season, but like right now I'm just growing a ton. I feel like it's really been helping me. So a person who has an actual degree in therapy and counseling. Qualified person. And I also qualified. Yeah. And that person is asking these questions. What are the signs of health for your emotional health? I also have a spiritual director. And so I would say her question is, how is your soul? And I have actually seen her, this is just for me personally, I've seen her consistently for 11 years, at least once a month. Wow. And so that's a different way of approaching it. Other times I've had coaches, leadership coaches for more practical accountability and growth. I've had support groups in the past. And I've had groups of other people who are in a similar life stage to me, asking each other, how are we doing as we move forward? This is all things that I've had at different times, and I have there is just no reason for anyone to think that I could do this kind of stuff that I do, which, isn't crazy, but to be a leader of a community, that's a lot, and I could not do it without help.
That's good. And I'll share some similar, and then I think there's a little tool I want to give people as a thing to work with. Similarly, therapy whenever I need it. I think I just decided that. And there are chapters I don't, and there are chapters I have done, and not always for the obvious expected things. You know what I mean? It may be something in the past, it may be some professional, but I've made a commitment to, if that's what I need, that's what I get. And I don't question. question that. I've had a spiritual director, but only for a short season. I really enjoyed it, but it felt like it was very ring fenced. And so having regular retreats has been a very helpful piece.
There you go, yeah.
Because that has been time away where I'm not in my house, it's somebody else's house. So therefore I'm not distracted, which has given me room to pay attention to those things which have come up.
Yeah.
And those things that keep coming up. I think having friends and peers professionally has been very helpful, and having those kind of establishing the kinds of relationships when people can say what's really going on.
Yeah.
You know, and what are you doing, and what are you doing about it, and where are you right now? All of those sorts of things.
Yep.
I think that's been a cool piece. One, and I think like you, being willing, I mean, yes, the fitness piece and all of that kind of stuff, and not underestimating the impact that has on all these things. But I think making sure that there is an assumption that I don't care whether I'm leading 10 people or 10,000, I'm always going to need help. Mm-hmm. I'm always going to need to be attending to these things which determine my emotional capacity.
Yep. That's good.
I think one thing I found I think it was last year, and I'd just come off like, I think I'd done a crazy amount of speaking, and the book had come out, and I was spent. I mean, I was just spent, and I was wrung out, and I was chatting to a friend of mine who I'd known since I was 20. We were on WhatsApp, and she asked me some questions, and I suddenly thought, I mean, and she was just asking about hobbies and things. I thought, oh my gosh, it's been so long, I can't even answer the questions. And it was just one of those moments where I thought, okay, I need to take stock of my life. And so what I did is I maybe approached 3 or 4 people who knew me really well. Mm-hmm. And I asked them, what questions do I need to be asking myself right now? And I did it for my personal life, and I later did it for the professional one, but it was the personal one that was the one that was really needed. And I think what that did was it gave the people around me the chance to say what they were seeing and the things that I could not see myself.
Yeah.
And it gave me a chance to say, it gave me a chance to say, this is some work that needs to be done. Because sometimes we don't know what work needs to be done. We know something's off. We know that we're not functioning. We know that we're crying all the time or we're angry all the time, but that's as far as we go.
Right.
But if there are people who can say these are the questions you need to ask yourself, and I think I said no more than 5. And I think some just gave one question, some gave more. But people who I trusted, people who I felt secure asking questions with, and people who I felt would have some insight, was a really valuable thing. And I couldn't recommend that. I mean, I know for some of us, we may not be in a position to get therapy right now.
Yeah.
You know, we're paying down bills, we've got credit cards to pay off, or whatever your story is. But if there's somebody in your life you could say, and I would recommend 2, if you could, because just different.
Yeah.
What questions should I be asking myself? And if they say what areas, say just about how I'm doing personally, about my personality, about my emotions, or whatever, or you just give them freedom and say about whatever you want.
Yeah.
Just freedom. I think that's worth doing.
Yeah, I remember when you did that. That was really powerful. Great. Okay, so let's give people some questions to think about. If you journal or take some notes or type things out, or just have some space to sit and think.
Yeah. My first question for you is, who should you ask to do that for you?
Yeah, I was going to say that too. Who are the people, at least 2 people that you feel like you could honestly answer the question, how are you really? Mm-hmm. And then say, and what questions should I be asking myself? Mm-hmm. That would be huge.
That'd be huge.
I think the question about pattern behaviors.
Yeah.
What are things I'm noticing, behaviors and or emotions that seem to be on a loop?
Yeah. I would ask if there are any particular people that bring that, is there a person who always makes you feel, or you always feel that around them? And I'm not asking you about that relationship. Still, just go and look at that emotion and that reaction and say, okay, because then there's an identifiable area of something there.
Right. Are there areas of my life where I'm feeling the tendency to want to withdraw or compartmentalize or silo?
Yeah.
And try to keep them from affecting each other?
Yeah.
And then what's going on there?
I think another way, and you might find you have the same answers for this, but we're giving you a range of questions just so that we can access them.
Some people identify different questions.
I want to ask about the indicators.
Yep.
What are your indicators right now? Is it, you're eating a lot these days, you're drinking a lot these days, or
not eating.
You're not eating at all these days, you're over-exercising these days, you're sleep. Like you were saying, for you, it wasn't, you had this kind of mild, low-level depression, as it were, and it was like you're sleeping a lot.
Yeah,
or you're
more
irritable.
more for me
More for you.
more than is normal for me.
And again, there were indicators that could be interpreted one way, or there's this.
Right.
I think it would be good to do some like an indicator audit of your life right now.
Yeah, an audit of things.
And see what those strong emotions are that come out, or those behavioral patterns that
Absolutely,
are evident.
Yeah, good. Good. I think that's good to get people going.
Yeah.
And maybe the final one is just, what is my next step to grow in my emotional health? Because I think what I want to challenge everybody into is everyone has a next step. Because this isn't like a finite
That's so good.
thing. There's this sense of, what's
good.
the next thing I can be doing? Okay, so right now it's fall. So I can, in Minnesota, we can still go outside. I need to make sure I get outside before it turns to winter. Or I don't know.
Yeah.
There's always something that we can be doing to help expand our emotional and psychological capacity.
That's good. I like it.
Because so much it depends on it.
Yeah.
So
brilliant.
Great. All right. Well, I think we have one more conversation in this series. So we'll get to that next week. Thanks for being with us, everybody.
Take care. Have a
Bye.
good week.
Talk to you soon.
Just turn it off. Big finger has come.